Have you ever been truly, deeply thirsty? I mean, not just for a glass of water, but for something more? For meaning, for wholeness, for a real sense of purpose. Well, in this explainer, we're going to dive into that deep spiritual thirst and the incredible promise of something called living water. Okay, let's get into it.
All right, so let's start with a famous story from the Old Testament. You probably know it. The Israelites are in the desert, they're thirsty, they're complaining, and they're demanding water. So Moses strikes a rock and water gushes out. Now, what's the miracle there? Most of us would say, getting water from a rock, right? Well, it turns out the real miracle is probably not what you're thinking.
So here's where things get really interesting. See, the Sinai desert was actually full of porous rocks that naturally collected water. Shepherds striking them to get a little drink was a common, everyday thing. So the miracle wasn't the act of getting water from a rock. The real miracle was the sheer amount of water. It just kept coming and coming, enough to satisfy thousands of desperately thirsty people. It was a miracle of pure abundance. And this comparison just hits the nail on the head. The true miracle was God's overwhelming provision. It wasn't just a trickle, it was an endless supply. It met a physical need for sure, but it was also pointing to a much, much deeper spiritual promise. And it's this idea of an endless supply that acts as a bridge to the New Testament.
This brings us right to our first big idea, the promise of living water. That physical water in the desert, it was a sign, pointing to something so much greater, something Jesus himself would later reveal.
You can see this really powerful evolution here. It all starts with physical water, right? It quenches a temporary thirst. But then Jesus comes along and elevates this whole concept, promising a living water that quenches our deepest spiritual thirst forever. So what is this living water? Well, it's the Holy Spirit. It's the very love of God poured directly into our hearts.
Jesus makes this incredible promise to a Samaritan woman he meets at a well. He's telling her and all of us that the things we usually chase to satisfy our longings, approval, success, stuff, they're all like that well water. They satisfy us for a little while, but that thirst always comes back. What he's offering is something permanent, something that becomes a spring inside of us.
So, okay, that raises a pretty important question. How do we get this incredible gift of living water today? The answer, as the homily explains, is through the sacrament of baptism.
Baptism marks a truly radical change in our very identity. I mean, before, yeah, we are creations of God, absolutely, but we're kind of like the Israelites in the desert, still searching. After baptism, we become something totally new. We aren't just created by God, we become literal children of God. The scriptures even call us a new creation.
So think of it this way. Baptism isn't just some ceremony. It's the gateway. It's the actual entry point that allows us as human beings to start participating in the very life of God himself, the life of the Trinity. I mean, that is a profound and often overlooked reality of our faith.
And this participation, well, it changes everything about us. It elevates our human nature to a level that is, frankly, extraordinary. Let's take a look at what that actually means.
The early church fathers had a big word for this process, divinization. It's this incredible idea that through grace, we are literally drawn up into the divine life. We begin to share in God's own nature. It's not about becoming God, but about becoming united with him in this unbelievably intimate way.
This divinization gives us what some theologians call a supernature. It doesn't get rid of our human nature, it perfects it, it elevates it. Grace allows us to do things that are way beyond our normal human abilities, like truly knowing and loving God and having faith, hope, and charity that come directly from him.
But here's a really critical point. This isn't magic. This incredible potential doesn't just activate on its own. It requires our active cooperation. We actually have to open our hearts to this reality, listen to God speaking to us, and consciously choose to embrace the gifts we've been given. And there is no better example of this transformation in action than the story of the woman at the well, the very person to whom Jesus first promised this living water.
Just look at this incredible journey. She starts out as a total outcast, coming to the well at noon, the hottest part of the day, just to avoid the people who judge her. She's completely isolated by her shame. But in her honest, raw encounter with Jesus, something just shifts. He reveals who he is, and she is completely transformed. That shame is gone, and it's replaced by a mission. She literally runs back to the town that rejected her and becomes their first evangelist.
This quote really gets to the heart of her transformation, doesn't it? Her thirst changes. It's no longer just about avoiding the work of drawing water. Now she thirsts to be complete, to be made whole, to finally see herself the way God sees her, loved and full of purpose. That is the thirst the living water satisfies. So, this brings the whole story right back home, to us. We've seen the miracle, we understand the promise, and we've witnessed the transformation. Now, the question turns inward. You know, at the deepest level, our thirst is for union with God. It's a longing for what humanity lost, way back in the beginning, that full communion, that sense of being authentically whole. Every other thirst we feel in life, for acceptance, for love, for meaning, it's really just an echo of this one fundamental thirst for God.
And just like for the woman at the well, this transformation is possible for every single one of us. But it requires our yes. It requires that we allow God to work in us, to break down our defenses, and to truly, fully, and radically transform us from the inside out.
So as we finish up, I'll just leave you with this question. Lent is the perfect season for this kind of deep reflection. What is it that you are truly, deeply thirsty for? And are you willing to ask for the living water that promises to satisfy that thirst forever?